Did you know that today, March 22nd, is World Water Day? Hello. Welcome to the Breaking News Word channel. A project in some capitals of the world such as London and Seoul shows that it is possible to revive rivers. Temisa, Reno, Junjai, revitalized urban rivers bring life back to cities and confirm that investing in the recovery of watercourses has an impact on common well-being. It was no wonder that several rivers around the world had death certificates issued in recent decades. Urban growth without expansion of sanitation infrastructure at the same pace and deforestation on the banks that accelerates the silting up of watercourses can kill a river. But revitalization experiences are beginning to show that there are policies and technologies capable of bringing back to life water arteries essential to the quality of life in cities. Recovering water resources matters for biodiversity, water supply, and human health, but also for the economy. Restoring polluted waters not infrequently attracts investment and oxygenates degraded regions. A striking example is that of the British Thames, which in 1957 was even declared biologically dead by the National History Museum in London, after many decades of pollution accentuated by the Industrial Revolution. In the 19th century, due to the waste dumped into it and its tributaries, the river was a source of pests such as cholera. In the particularly hot summer of 1858, there was a record of a great stench, which led part of the population to leave London. Sanitation systems mitigated the bad smell and unhealthy conditions, but were destroyed in World War II. The recovery of the river that runs through the British capital had to wait until the 1960s, when sanitation policies began to improve water quality. The turning point only came in 1976, when all the sewage thrown into the Thames began to be treated. More efficient monitoring systems and instruments to increase oxygenation were activated. In 2021, the fish species in the river exceeded 100. Paris is still working on restoring its iconic Seine, with plans similar to those that brought the Thames back to life. The French capital wants to make the waters of the Seine bathable for the first time in a century for the 2024 Olympic Games. It's not the first time the cleanup has been promised, but now there's a concrete project worth €1.4 billion, part of Mayor and Hidalgo's initiative to make the city greener and more environmentally sustainable. The expectation is that by 2025 there will be 26 river pools in the city, to the delight of Parisians in the summer. Part of the solution for the Seine lies in the renovation of Paris' sanitation system, showing that, in this area, there is no mystery. In 2022, the volume of sewage dumped into the river was 90% less than a decade ago, according to a recent report by Time magazine. Even so, last year alone, 1.9 million cubic meters of untreated sewage ended up in the Seine. This is the final challenge for the city of Paris. The Tagus, the largest river in the Iberian Peninsula, underwent a revitalization that cost millions of euros at the beginning of this century. These were sanitation and renovation works on the water and sewage networks that spanned decades and came to an end about 10 years ago, with benefits for postcards that it crosses, from Spain to the mouth near the Portuguese capital, Lisbon. Industrial expansion has also caused problems on Copenhagen's canals, such as the famous Nyhavn, but since the 1990s there has been a recovery plan underway, focusing on improving the sewer system in the Danish capital. In less than a decade, the waters were already used for bathing. Outside Europe, the most notorious example comes from South Korea, with the Cheonggyecheon River in Seoul. The Japanese even tried to land it during the occupation from 1910 to 1945. With the ceasefire of the Korean War, migration to the South Korean capital increased the dumping of waste into the river. The government decided to build it in the 1950s and, in 1971, began to build a super viaduct over it. Symbol of progress, the work for a few years fulfilled this promise. Close to the turn of the millennium, however, the region was already obsolete and abandoned. Heavy traffic, noise, and excessive pollution helped repel the population. The river practically dried up, and engineers discovered that the accumulation of carbon monoxide, methane, and other gases under the viaduct helped to corrode the structure, making it unsafe to use the route. Instead of restoring the structure that suffocated the river, the government decided to discover and revitalize it, betting on attracting residents, tourists, and businesses. There were 2 years of works, until the river was exposed again. The result exceeded expectations. The waterfront became a focal point of the project, a recreational area between the skyscrapers. Cheonggyecheon is now more resilient to rainwater. The region has become a major tourist and high-value real estate spot, with the average price of adjacent properties increasing by between 30% and 50% within a 50-meter radius in the years following the constructions. Temperatures recorded in the region dropped in the summer months, impacting the quality of life in Seoul. No definitive solution for teat. Despite so many international experiences, Brazil is still far from implementing plans such as the depollution of the Teat River, São Paulo's main water artery, whose degradation reflects the country's backwardness in this area, despite ongoing projects for decades. But Brazil already has success stories, such as the 3-decade process to revive the Jundiaí River, in the interior of São Paulo. In 1984, the town halls of the cities through which it passes joined together in the Committee for Studies and Recovery of the Jundiaí River, together with industries and the government of São Paulo. Infrastructures such as outfalls, treatment stations and collection networks were built, all planned to ensure that sewage from the 8 cities in the river course was treated. Gradually, fish, herons and birds returned to the region. Transnational challenge. Recovering transnational rivers is a more complex challenge, as it requires consensus between countries. An important European waterway, the Rhine, was the victim of a major environmental disaster in 1986, when more than 1,300 tons of highly flammable compounds caught fire at the Sandoz chemical plant in Switzerland. The causes were never clarified, but toxic substances ended up in the river that also crosses Austria, France, Liechtenstein, Germany and Holland, until it flows into the North Sea. The following year, the Rhine Action Program was created to recover the river, with representatives from the countries involved. The agreement became popularly known as Salmon 2000, as one of the goals was for this species, highly sensitive to pollution, to return to the waters by the turn of the millennium. Even before the accident, the fish were repelled by the region's chemical industries. €13 billion was spent, of which €9 billion was spent on sewage treatment alone. The salmon came back 3 years ahead of schedule. The US and Mexico also have an agreement on the Colorado River, which determines a volume of water that the US must guarantee annually to its southern neighbors. Most countries that share rivers, however, do not have such pacts. There is, for example, no cooperation between the countries crossed by the Nile, Amazon and Mekong, 3 of the largest watercourses in the world. We will update the information as it arises. If you want to know more, like the video and subscribe to the channel to stay informed.